Yeah, we've had to do that too, so we'll wait for you to make sure
All
that
right.
we're following the
Let,
law.
yes, let me read that then quick. I'm glad that you're understanding. Okay. In accordance with Utah Code 52-4-2074 of the Utah Open and Public Meeting Act, I have determined that conducting an electronic meeting of the Centerville City Council with an anchor location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location. This determination is based on the facts and circumstances surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic. Considering the continued number of COVID-19 case counts in Utah, meeting in an anchor location presents substantial risk to the health and safety of those in attendance because physical distancing measures may be difficult to maintain at City Hall. Thank you. So we now have, we may have Representative Hawks or Senator Weiler. Are you with us too?
This is Todd Weiler. I'm on the phone. I couldn't get the Zoom link to work, but I'm on phone.
No, that's probably my fault. I'm so sorry. Hey, so we know that you have a vote in a few minutes, and so thanks for both for joining us. Representative Hawks will be soon. We were thrilled that you were able to find some time to get with us tonight. Specifically, I know this council would probably be interested in what may be on the agenda in the upcoming session in regards to housing issues, maybe the ADU bill, and some things along those lines, and whatever else you two may feel is appropriate for us as city officials. Does that work?
Yeah, that would be fine.
Go ahead, and Todd, you're welcome to go, and then I can follow, or just whatever you'd like.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, President.
Yeah, I'll be quick. Maybe before I go into some of the housing issues, let me just give you a quick update. Everybody's aware of COVID and what's going on. We've been fighting this since last March. We saw, just to maybe give you a little update, we saw what happened as we shut down businesses, basically self-isolated in March and April last year. We held a quick special session, put together a legislative commission, pushed back open with the recommendations of the governor from a red to orange status, opening up restaurants and spas and exercise shops in some way, shape, or form since last May. I assume your budgets are similar to ours. We don't get hardly any, if any, property tax. So yours are probably more stable than ours, but we get income tax and sales tax. Our sales tax revenues have actually outperformed income tax, which is unusual. So I assume your budgets have done well if you're sales tax based. But the ability for us to be able to function and provide government services have been because of a great effort by businesses and the medical community to try to blend the response to COVID. And that has been an extremely difficult thing to do, if you can imagine, during the last 9 months, is to try to do it in a respectful way. And our case fatality rate, if you know what that is, you take the number of cases and divide them, the 300,000 cases or some odd, divide them by the number of, divide the fatalities by that number, and you get a 0.0048. And that means for every person who is diagnosed with COVID, doesn't get it, but is diagnosed with COVID, 99.5% of them survive, which is the lowest in the country, the lowest fatality rate, best survival rate in the country. We've got one of the lowest unemployment rates. And I think we blended it fairly well. One statistic you may not know a lot about, but there's a study that many people who get COVID either don't know it or don't get tested. And so they did a little study on that last June and found that for every person who got COVID, there was another 1.5 people who was diagnosed with COVID. There was another 1.5 people that actually had it. So if there's 300,000 people that have been diagnosed with it right now, there's about 450,000, 300 times 1.5 additional that probably have COVID. So that means there's about 700 to maybe 1 million people, which is about a third of the population that have had COVID in Utah, which is a fairly large number. We're seeing our case numbers level off. They're still extremely high. The hospitalization rates are high, but we're seeing them move downward, and that's a good sign. And with the vaccines out, and I could talk forever about vaccines, but I won't, because I'm kind of frustrated at how they're going out. We need to get them to people that are vulnerable above 75, but we're with that, our future is extremely bright. So I to be where we're at in January of 2021, we're putting a lot of this behind us, and so hopefully you'll be able to move ahead with what I'm hoping is extremely bright 2021. You asked about housing real quick, and there's been a lot of effort been made on affordable housing. But no secret that nobody can afford a house anymore. There's a lot of effort toward trying to do some density housing, and the simple fact is we can throw a lot of money at affordable housing and none of it works. There's not a government program I've seen that works. But what works is the free market, and we need to have the ability to move our housing project, both single family and multifamily, the process faster. If we had an oversupply of lots, if we had an oversupply of apartments, you'd see the price of them coming down. The problem is we see an undersupply. So we don't know how to attack it. I've been a city councilman, and the worst public hearings I've been in have been a multifamily rezone, so I know what you're going through. But somehow we've got to band together to find a way to allow for more product to be delivered to the market, or we're going to continue to see housing affordability that just go through the roof. So I'm going to be quiet for a minute. And Todd, I don't know if you have anything to say. We've got another 5 or 10 minutes here.
Yeah, thanks. I echo everything that Stuart said, but I've got one bill. I don't think it'll affect you. I'm happy to talk to your city attorney about it in detail, but there was an issue where there was a whistleblower complaint filed by a city employee against a city, and the court, it went all the way to the Court of Appeals, and they basically said that the way the statute was written, that it was impossible for the whistleblower to comply with the timeline because there was some ambiguity in the statute. You had to wait a certain time, and then, but if you waited too long, it was a gotcha. And so I'm trying to draft a fix to that. I was a little disappointed. I approached the League of Cities and Towns for their help on the language of the bill, and they said they liked it the way it was, and I'm like scratching my head because the way it is, it's impossible to comply with. So in any event, I don't think that will have a big impact on Centerville, and I think that the legislative intent was there, but there's just some language issues. But I haven't heard any specific AUD legislation. I don't know if you're aware of some that I don't know about, but contrary to popular belief, we don't all talk during the 10 months in between sessions and tell each other what we're doing. So a lot of times we kind of find out the first week of the session what's going on. But I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have as well.
Can you the two of you, because we have our police chief on the line too, anything about public safety that may be coming up that you could tell us about?
Well, I think there's about 60 bills. I heard through the grapevine there's about 60 bills filed regarding policing because of all the riots last year. I don't imagine they're all going to pass. I know that there's going to be a big emphasis, especially on the Democrats, coming from the Democrats, on trying for police reform. I don't know exactly what that will look like. I was approached by some of my constituents in Salt Lake City trying to ask me to run a bill to curb what the mayor could do to their police department because she had told them not to respond to, acts of vandalism and things during the riots. But I declined to run that bill. I don't want to get involved in local governments telling a mayor what she can tell her police chief and vice versa. So I do think that Stuart, I don't know what you're hearing, but I do expect that there will be a lot of bills dealing with those types of issues. I know that Sim Gill kind of released a wish list of reforms that he'd like to see, and I went through that list, and I was not impressed with it. There weren't too many of those ideas that I thought I would find myself supporting. But because of all the BLM, Black Lives Matter protests over the summer, I expect you're going to see knee-jerk reactions from both sides on those issues, and I think we'll just have to let them run through the legislative grinder and kind of see what sausage gets made. But I'm not convinced that that we have a huge problem in our law right now. We did pass one bill over the summer in a special session to outlaw chokeholds, and I think with the passage of that legislation, it's my understanding that Utah had already complied with all of the requests from the NAACP, National Association of Colored Persons, and I'm not sure that we need a ton more reform, but the legislature is by design. We react to things, and there was a lot that happened in 2020, and so I think you'll see a lot of bills. But I also think some of that fervor has died down. And of course, on any bill that makes it out of the House into the Senate, I would appreciate your feedback, especially from your police chief. And we're going to have Tom Ross. You've probably heard he's leaving Bountiful City, and he'll be working as the director of CCJJ in the Cox administration. So I will also look to him for wise advice and counsel on some of these issues.
Do you anticipate in the session, I noticed that there was a huge difference between the response to residential picketing that took place in Salt Lake at Dr. Dunn's home because they had an ordinance on file versus Dr. Minor, whose community did not have a residential picketing ordinance on file. So there was a lot more aggressive response from protesters at his home. Do you anticipate anything happening at a state level, or do you believe that residential picketing ordinances will still be a city function?
Stuart, you want to lead on that, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I can't imagine we'll take that on as a state level, but there may be a bill file and opened, and if it does, we'll probably get the league's input. But if we start passing ordinances at the state, my good heavens, watch out. It just, I think we'll see what happens. And I just echo that everything Todd said is right on. There's a lot of bills up here, but I can tell you, generally speaking, that at least in the majority caucus in the Senate, there's a ton of support for and appreciation for our existing police forces. And there's a very positive sentiment for what's been done. And as you see, some of the responses to those that have been put in harm's way, and the responses of those first responders coming to their rescue, there's a lot of respect. And so I'm not sure what's going to get filed, and there may be a little bit of knee-jerk reaction either direction. But at the end of the day, I think if we get the bills vetted right, if we pass anything, it should be a pretty decent piece of legislation.
Yeah, and on the home picketing, first of all, let me say I find that personally despicable what happened to Dr. Hun and Dr. Dunn and Dr. Minor. But I think we have to be careful, because I think protesting is one of the the earmarks of a democracy and a free society. And so I would encourage, and it sounds like you may already be doing it, Centerville City, to update your ordinance and make sure you've got all of your ducks lined up. But at the same time, I think we have to expect that civil disobedience and protesting will happen and should be not only tolerated but encouraged. Both President Adams and I attended the inauguration of the new governor yesterday, and we drove through, I don't know, Stuart, you might have gotten there earlier than I did, but I drove through about 200 protesters, some of them shouting profanities on the way into Tuacahn. And it wasn't necessarily pretty, but, I'm glad that I live in a country where we allow that, even though sometimes it's I don't necessarily agree with the message, but I'm glad that they can come out and shout as I'm driving by. So I'm not sure where the city is on that, but I expect as long as we have COVID, we're still going to have protesters with whatever restrictions we get from the executive branch or from the legislature. There's just people on every side of the COVID issues.
And I agree with you. And it's a fantastic hallmark of American society that we've protested since the very beginning of our country. I think where it comes down for me as the fundamental issue is, when does protesting turn into personal intimidation? Whereas if they came to my house or the mayor's house, we just have to put up with that. We're elected officials. But I think in the case of civil servants who are not elected, I think that the standard of protection should be a little tighter for them. So that's why I'm interested from a state level perspective, because I just was seriously shocked to first off learn that it was legal in some areas of the state and illegal in other areas, or at least, what shall we say, restricted in what people could do. I don't necessarily want to restrict people from the right of protest. I think it's a very important thing to have free speech. I just really struggle with what becomes intimidation of an individual in that arena. So it's a tough one.
No, I think
so.
We
did a tough one. And we both agree with that. And it'll be, if we touch it as a legislature, it'll have to be vetted, because we'll have to find that right balance, and it'll take a while for us to get there. So, but we'll be listening to your input. So I'm going to have to take off, because I probably ought to be there, somewhat on time. But any other questions before we do? I appreciate all you're doing, Mary. You're doing a great job. We've got Centerpoint Theater. We hope we can get back going and keep them alive. And there's a lot of great things happening in the state, even with COVID and with the vaccine coming out. Again, as I started off, I won't say that it's behind us, because I don't think it ever will for a while. I think we're living with it for another long period of time. But I think maybe some of the biggest challenges are behind us, and hopefully we can move forward and be able to focus on. I'd like to be able to focus on a whole lot more than COVID during the session. So I hope we do.
Yeah, that would be great. Senator Weiler, did you want to say something?
I'd like to echo that again, and I know that we're getting cut short tonight. So especially with Zoom, I'd be more than welcome to be invited back at a future meeting, whether it's next week or next month or in March. We can continue the conversation. Maybe it makes sense to do it a week or two into the session when we kind of know a little bit more about what we're expecting. But I do think that just this capability to meet electronically makes it easier, where I don't have to fight traffic up to Centerville and things like that, to have some discussion during the session.
Thank you. So you have a vote in leadership tonight?
Yeah, we have a vacancy because Senator Himmert resigned to go into the governor's cabinet as director of GOED, and so his leadership position is open for replacement tonight.
I know our time's very limited. I just have one question, if Paul could weigh in. And do you have any sense of where the law enforcement community is landing on the concealed carry dialogue and the attempt to remove the concealed carry permit?
So we haven't had a chance to have, we haven't had a meeting that's scheduled for next week to discuss those issues. That's on the numbered bills ledger that I've got today. I don't know where we're going to land on that, to tell you the truth. I know that there will be some concern about just letting anybody who wants to, that's old enough, not a felon, to carry concealed. But I also know that there's a lot of chiefs that are very pro Second Amendment, and it's going to be an interesting discussion. I'm not sure where we're going to land on that one.
I don't love these gun bills, and I'll tell you, it's hard for Republicans to vote against a gun bill, because then we get labeled, anti-Second Amendment, even if we're not. But I will say this: there's 20 other states that don't require a permit for concealed carry, and statistically, it doesn't appear that it's making a difference whether you require the permit or not. And so, That's interesting to me. I'm always curious. You know, we had this issue come up in 2012 or 2013, and the governor vetoed it, and it's come up several years since then. But it didn't make it to the Senate floor for one reason or another. But you know, I was surprised to read, you know, this week that there were 16 other states plus 4 with some restrictions that didn't require it. And statistically, when you look at putting cops in danger or, you know, whatever, there doesn't appear to be a statistical difference. And so if that's the case, I think we're going to probably have a hard time, you know, continuing to require a permit in Utah for something that appears to be, you know, readily available under the Constitution. So I don't know. President, do you want to weigh in on that one?
Yeah,
it sounds like he's still there.
Yeah, I've got to leave, but it's going to be one of those issues that I think we're just going to have to listen to and try to make our best decision. You know, again, the data you talked about, we'll weigh into it and then try to figure out what's right and wrong and whether the current system is really broken. I think that's the question. I think we've got a pretty decent system right now, but we'll probably have that debate and see what happens.
Thank you both for joining us. We appreciate you squeezing us in with that important vote coming up.
Are you both planning to do update sessions during the session, and will they be on Zoom?
I can't speak for Stuart, but Ray Ward and Melissa Ballard and I will do one every Saturday morning on Zoom during the session. And we're also doing a little preview next week. I think it's on Thursday. I'll email that information to the mayor and have him distribute that.
Thank you.
And we usually try to do one or two. I may join them in there so we don't duplicate. And but yes, I'll be around and available. So, and the mayor knows how to get me. He's got free dial. Thanks. See ya.
Representative Hawks, welcome. Unmute yourself, or somebody unmute him for us.
You get cleanup crew. Everyone else has departed for a vote.
Tim, Representative Hawks, thank you. They had a leadership vote, as you probably know, but we're thrilled to have you one-on-one. You know, we're not getting his audio. Can we get his audio somehow?
I would give you the IT suggestion of just wrap the laptop against the desk really hard, but that doesn't always work.
It looks like his microphone's turned off. We'll give you a couple seconds, Representative Hawks, on your end if you can figure it out. We're excited to have you here and to talk to you.
Say, Mayor, I just want to let you know I'm working with Robin right now trying to get on. So we got two issues. Robin has a tough time getting on, so I'll help out Janet in just a moment with Representative Hawks. If you just give me just a second.
Oh, is it on our end with Representative Hawks?
I have no idea, but I haven't diagnosed it because I'm working with Robin. So just give me one moment.
Okay. So Representative Hawks, you can hear us, right? Thumbs up if you can hear us.
I think he's gone. Or he's really, really good at being still.
Oh, he's frozen, isn't he? Yeah, he's gone. Hey, Chief, while we have a second, so it looks like Bountiful's going to be in the market for hiring a police chief, huh?
Yes. Yeah, that was a shocker to everybody. I don't think anybody was expecting that. Tom's been a great chief over there. Sorry. Had something go down the wrong tube there. No, Tom's been great, and he's been very active with the UCOPA, Utah Chiefs of Police, and with the legislature. It was really no surprise as far as him going on to something like that. I just think the timing was everybody's surprise. You know, I don't have any inside scoop over there what's going on, but they've got two very capable people that could take the job on. I'm you know, crossing my fingers for that. Dave Edwards and Ed Beeler over there are both very, very capable, and I think they do an awesome job. But we're going to miss Tom. He's been great.
Hey, Chief, you must have caught my ahas from yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah, all of a sudden something went down the wrong tube there.
I know just how you feel.
Yeah, for sure.
See, with that symptom, just head to the state fairgrounds. They can tell you in 15 minutes.
I've got my appointment tomorrow for vaccination.
Excellent.
So yeah, that's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out with Tom. So we got a new chief in West Bountiful, a fairly new one in Woods Cross, and so.
Were they hired internally in West Bountiful, Woods Cross? I haven't talked with the mayors.
Yeah, West Bountiful hired internally. Woods Cross picked up Chad Soph. He was up in Garland. He was a chief in Garland. Before that, he was with Cottonwood Heights and then Salt Lake County before that. I've known Chad for 25 years or something, but Chad's a great guy. I just think that I can kind of see why they went that direction. Woods Cross, West Bountiful. I think they could have gone either way, but I think he'll be good. He's kind of young, but I think he'll be good.
Yeah.
Mayor?
Yes.
Is it working? This is Representative Hawks.
We got you. Perfect.
If at first you don't succeed, I don't know if I'm calling in on my phone, but it's been a struggle.
Hey, thanks. So let me just update you then. We had Senator Weiler and Senator Adams on for about a half hour. Of course, they had a vote to replace Senator Hemmert with him being going to go-ed.
Yeah.
And we talked briefly with them about housing issues and public safety issues. Maybe from the House side, since it's Representative Ward that's introducing the bill, do you wanted to, maybe you wanted to discuss maybe a little bit about ADUs, and then Representative Ray had put out a statement about housing as well too. I don't know if you want to address either one of those, or if you just want to go your own direction on housing and then maybe your own opinion and feel on public safety.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to do that, Mayor. And I'm not the best expert on some of the specific proposals that are out there. I know Representative Ward has been looking at ADUs, and I think he feels like there are some systemic obstacles that he'd like to help, that he'd like to implement to facilitate ADUs. You know, that you've got the code issues that make it very, very difficult in some cases to do that. So I think he sees it, and I think he's right that ADUs are kind of a way to allow people flexibility as they get older, provide, basically secure the rights of private property owners to choose to rent out their basement if they want to, without having to fundamentally restructure their home. So I think I think that's a good dialogue and discussion to have. And again, that's my understanding, is he's just sort of looking view from 10,000 feet. How can we empower this as kind of a solution, particularly when we're dealing with housing affordability becoming a real challenge for a lot of folks. So that's about all I know about the ADU piece. I don't know what Representative Ray is doing on the issue. Over the past few years, there's been a lot of discussion about how do you encourage cities to kind of bear their fair share, if you will, or, to zone in a way that meets regional needs, to look outside their borders. Centerville actually comes out pretty good on a lot of those measures because we have a mix of housing. We have a fair bit of high density and medium density. And so, I think Centerville comes out pretty well. I think it's a struggle for a city like West Bountiful, for example. But there's always that discussion, and how do you properly balance sort of, regional transportation and infrastructure needs, affordable housing needs, with the ability of cities to justifiably to shape, what their future looks like and what their housing mix looks like and everything else. So I'm sure that's going to continue to be a discussion, but outside of that one ADU bill, I'm not aware of any specific legislation on that.
Okay. Maybe what insight you have on public safety you could also bring, and any other housing thoughts that you might have, and then maybe a couple things that you might be working on. I mean, we love Senator Adams, Senator Weiler, but you're kind of special to us because you live right here in our own city. So you have your boots on the ground and know what all our residents are concerned about.
Well, thanks, Mayor, and I appreciate that, and it is an honor and a privilege to represent Centerville in the legislature. In terms of public safety, I mean, the only thing I've heard, and it's mostly anecdotally, we're just, starting to, a lot of times as legislatures, I'm the rules chair, so I'm supposed to manage the flow of bills in the House, but you don't even know what's there until the bills start to get approved and numbered and sent out. So it's hard to know. I've heard, you've heard rumors and rumblings of dozens upon dozens of bills in kind of the public safety space. And my guess is that they're on all sides. They're all over the place. I will say that we as a legislature take, very seriously. We're not going to be one of these cities that's, or one of these states that, or jurisdictions that's looking to defund the police. And what you immediately see in those situations where they try to crack down on that is you get the same people that were protesting a few weeks ago are now coming back and begging for law enforcement come in because their neighborhoods aren't safe. So if I had to guess, the Utah legislature is not going to be looking to significantly weaken the ability of our law enforcement folks to do their job. We're probably going to err on the side of empowering them rather than disempowering them. So that's just kind of a big picture take. It's going to be interesting to see the mix. What we typically do with issues like that, when there's a whole bunch of bills in the same line, is we'll corral them and get all the stakeholders together, all the legislators who are working in that space, and see if there's a thoughtful, sensible compromise to be had. But it's really hard. My guess is there's just stuff all over the map, right, left, and center on that issue. And we'll just kind of have to see what comes forward.
Mayor, if I can maybe chime in here.
Yeah, Chief, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Representative Hawks, nice to have you on here. I didn't want to take much time with the senators because I knew that their time was pretty short, but I looked through the numbered bills that are in relation to public safety today that we have so far. And you're right, there is a lot of things coming down the railroad tracks in that vein that we're obviously going to keep our eyes on. I really wasn't concerned with too awfully much with what I was seeing for the most part, but I do have some concerns. There is this bill by Representative Brooks on carry concealed firearms, and that was a question that came up while we were talking with Stuart Adams and Todd Senator Weiler. But I'm not sure where we're going to land on that, to tell you the truth. I'm sure there's going to be some arguments back and forth on that, and we'll see how that one plays out. But Where we're probably concerned the most, there's a couple of areas. There tends to be a lot of knee-jerk reaction on legislation focused around use of force, understandably so. But where we get concerned is when officers become so tightly boxed in, it becomes an officer safety issue, and they become paralyzed for fear of, being in considerable jeopardy. For example, I understand that there's some work to get a bill out there to take away qualified immunity, which qualified immunity is basically case law or doctrine created by the Supreme Court that basically says that if it's not clearly defined law, clearly established law under case law, then an officer can have, or any public servant can have, qualified immunity when there's a violation, when the courts decide that that was a violation. So you have a situation where the courts haven't looked at a specific set of facts and decided that was a civil rights violation. So nobody knows. It's not clearly established. So all of a sudden you take away, or in that case, there's immunity afforded to the public servant. There's no clearly established law. We don't really know the rules of the game in this particular situation, so we're going to allow you to have qualified immunity. You take qualified immunity away, that will be the day I retire, I promise you. And I will be telling every officer I know to quit or to go find a job somewhere else and to get out of law enforcement. And I promise you that as well. That will be a game changer for everybody. Local jurisdictions or local governments, if they want to have a police department, are going to have to pay for, some pretty heavy duty insurance to keep their officers on board. And your officers aren't going to want to do anything. They're not going to be proactive. They're not going to be responsive. So anyway, that's one big area. Well, that's a big red flag for me, is the qualified immunity push that some people are trying to do and take away. It's a well thought out legal doctrine that the Supreme Court has ruled on over and over again. It makes a lot of sense, and it would just be devastating to lose that. So that's one area. The other area where there's a lot of talk and discussion. In fact, I just noticed a story on Channel 2 today on Brady Giglio concerns. Are you familiar with that term?
No.
So Brady Giglio, that is a court. It's a case law from, I think it's back in the 60s, actually, was when it was decided. But the application of it has become more prevalent in the last 10 years or so, where there is an affirmative duty on the prosecutor's part to disclose any exculpatory evidence in a trial. So anything that might be exculpatory, a prosecutor has an affirmative duty to disclose that to the defense counsel. And where this is being applied to law enforcement officers is if they have ever been disciplined for doing something dishonest. So if I discipline an officer for lying, for doing something maybe on a report, putting false information in a report or something like that, then I'm required to contact Davis County attorney, let them know about that officer. He's put on a list. It's called the Brady list. And then anytime that officer has a trial, the county attorney has to disclose to the defense attorney that particular allegation. It doesn't apply to just honesty issues. It could be that this person doesn't like people with red hairs. and if your defendant happens to have red hair, then that becomes a Brady Gilio concern, because that person may be biased against people with red hair. So you can see that the breadth of that is there's no limit really. But the main concern has to do with character issues. So I totally understand that, and there have been problems where chiefs of police, prosecutors have not disclosed those types of information to defense attorneys, and so there's been an effort to do a little bit of legislation on that. And one of them has to do, well, there's a couple of bills here, Representative Stoddard and Emoto? Senator Iwamoto, yeah. In reference to what would be required, adding additional requirements as far as reporting to post counsel. So the duty of a police chief to report to post counsel when an officer commits certain violations. One of them would be like a violation of the use of force policy. Another would be if there's an issue with dishonesty with the officer. So I can see the reasoning and the intent behind some of these bills that are being proposed. There's another one, in Senator Iwamoto's legislation, it's quite broad and requires all allegations. That what she's asking for is, say I have an officer, I'm disciplining him, or I'm in the process of disciplining him. Maybe he or she wasn't showing up to work on time on a regular basis, and so I'm going to do some discipline, and they resign. What that law is going to require me to do is to continue my investigation after this person is no longer an employee of mine to its conclusion, and then report the findings to post for them to investigate. And it also includes any allegation. So just an allegation. It doesn't have to be confirmed. So to me, it's kind of a slippery slope. There seems to be this effort to take away managing of a police department from the local authority and putting it on the backs of post, which is going to require a lot more investigators and money, even though there's no fiscal note attached to it. So on one hand, I can see what they're trying to accomplish, and it's something that we as chiefs of police need to recognize and make sure that we're stepping up and doing our job, and it's a discussion we're having among the chiefs of police. But I do want to just caution that there's going to be a fair amount of unintended consequences with those types of bills that could also have an effect on our recruitment ability and retention ability.
Well, Chief, I appreciate you flagging the issues. I think it sounds like there's some complex issues here. I think, like I said before about bills that are kind of in a certain lane, my guess is a lot of these will probably circle up and will ultimately go to law enforcement type committee, right? And and we have a member of law enforcement, Matt. What's Matt's last name? He's replacing Lee Perry, but he's a member of law enforcement, will be in. So his perspective is really valuable on things like this. And maybe there's some room to do something there. I mean, I think about it, if I was a criminal defendant and an officer had a claim against them based on that went to a matter of integrity, I would probably want that disclosed. Yeah. There gets up to a point where it's just ridiculous. Any little nitpicky thing, it's just an excuse for defense counsel to find an excuse to discredit somebody, and that clearly goes too far. So there's probably a balance that could be struck in that space. My guess is that the legislature will be very reluctant to move on a qualified immunity type thing. I mean, we have an interesting dynamic that's gone on in recent years, and that's where really libertarians have started to get a little more clout.
Right.
And a lot of this comes from that. You know, a lot of this gets pushed by kind of those libertarian types, which can have appeal both ways. So the libertarian group, the big libertarian group in the state, they're always palling up with the ACLU on these kind of issues. And so sometimes things have legs that, 5-10 years ago would never have legs.
Right.
But I think, eliminating qualified immunity, I'm just going to speculate here that most of my colleagues are not going to be excited about that, because what you're asking is somebody that's in an imminent threat type situation to make calculations about whether that's going to expose them to personal risk for civil liability and things like that. And that's just a terrible way to go about law enforcement. We're asking people to make snap judgments under imminent threat of danger. We know they're not going to get it perfect, but we don't expect them to get it perfect. The last thing we want them to do is hesitating in that crucial moment. So, we'll have to see where some of these are coming from. Again, if it's got a D by the name, usually it does not, it's going to struggle, right? Not always. Senator Iwamoto, she gets some stuff through, she knows how to work it, but it's probably going to go to a law enforcement oriented committee, and we'll see what comes out of that. But I would certainly, and the chiefs are really good about this. Let your legislators know if you see things that concern you, and that gets back to legislators, and then we vote on it.
Right. Yep. Thank you so much, Tim.
Yeah, you bet. So, Mayor, in terms of stuff that I'm working on, probably the most interesting thing, and some of my stuff's down in the weeds. I think we've got a little bit of a tweak to a property rights, sort of taxpayer right issue that we had a few years ago, that just sort of afforded some protection for property rights owners in terms of their assessments, right? And it really just some clarification of legislation that passed a few years ago. We still haven't finished that one up. I'm for better or for worse, the alcohol policy lead in the House. And that means that I invariably have very complicated and difficult alcohol policy bill that I've been working on. And probably the most interesting, and I think potentially most important piece of legislation I'm working on this year really deals with trying to recalibrate or refocus the state's economic development strategy. For several years, a lot of us have been looking into that. We're just kind of concerned that a lot of the economic development programs, they favor some, they sort of pick winners and losers. If you're a big company and these programs exist, you can go and you get a tax benefit or write-off or things for different things you're doing. And there's real question sometimes whether you're actually incentivizing a change in behavior. Is that company coming here because of the incentive, or they were going to come here anyway, and then you're just foregoing revenue for really for nothing? So there's some real questions and concerns about some of that stuff. The other thing that is that when you talk to legislators up and down the Wasatch Front, the biggest challenge that they're facing right now is growth. And a lot of us would have thought that COVID would slow that down, but COVID just really in many ways accelerated that. It's brought a lot more people into the state. They see the benefits of living here at a place that's a little bit freer, and where housing's a little more affordable relative to where they're coming from. And so growth is becoming this huge, huge issue. And so that's an interesting thing. Do we want to go out and incentivize more businesses to come here and to compete for talent with existing Utah companies? Or do we want to really go out and find those companies? If we're going to incentivize a company to come here, make sure they're a company that really fits the workforce needs of the state of Utah. That's not just white collar jobs, the most expensive jobs you can get, but jobs up and down the line, right? And all sort of brackets. And is this a company that engages in workforce training that's really helping build a skill set for the state over the long term? And what are the impacts of one of these companies when they come in? What are their impacts on infrastructure? Are they going to make a really bad infrastructure problem that then the state has to come in and fix? If so, then we really need to account for that when we're determining whether we want to try to encourage them to come. We really need to carefully weigh the costs and benefits in that space. So There's a big bill. It's really the result of 2 or 3 years worth of work. I'll be working with Senator Ann Milner on that one, and I'm kind of excited to see where that one goes.
That's great. Council, for Representative Hawks, you have any questions on anything you said so far, or anything that might be on your mind?
Yeah, Representative Hawks, this is Bill Ince.
Hey, Bill.
Are you familiar with this bill that has been proposed that would, I guess, protect people who don't get vaccinated from being denied access to services, businesses, etc.? And are you seeing anything on that? Has it been numbered yet?
So there was just barely a discussion about that, just a little bit House leadership. I think Representative Spendlove has that bill. And kind of the question is to what, how far does that bill go? I think there's generally a feeling, and again, I'm trying to speak for a body of 104, so I got to be careful here. Most people are not really hip to sort of vaccine mandates writ large, right? We exempt people already if they don't want to get a vaccine. Let them make that decision for them and their family. I think where it gets complicated and where we start to see differences, pretty stark difference of opinions in some cases, is when it comes to employers. So, and it's really like whose rights are going to be preeminent in that context. We're an at-will employment state, so generally you can quit or be fired at any time for any reason. We've seen a body of case law sort of, and protections built up in different spaces on that. But most folks here kind of believe, well, if an employer decides to impose that kind of, or private business decides to impose a restriction, well, that's their right. And if there's economic consequences from doing so, that's on them. Let's let them make that decision for themselves. So I think that's the space where I think if we saw a bill that, say, prohibited a business from making decisions about the way it wants to conduct its business, I don't think there's going to be support for that. But I think there probably is support for something that just says, hey, as a state, we're not going to let Salt Lake City sort of impose a blanket vaccine mandate requirement or that sort of thing. We want people to be able to, in good conscience, elect to not do that. So that's just, I know that bill's coming forward. I don't know exactly what it looks like. And if Representative Spendlove, based on my conversations, it's a little bit of a Chinese menu. He's trying to feel his way forward and figure out what pieces he wants to include in that, what pieces he's probably going to drop.
Okay.
So just as a practical point on that, I hope that Representative Spendlove is engaging all of the health professionals on that. There's a huge concern out there in the health community at large that if we don't reach herd immunity through vaccination in a rapid frame, we're going to end up with several mutated strains of COVID, and we're never going to get out of this.
Yeah, that's the tricky thing, George, right? I mean, that's really the tough thing with immunizations, right? Is we have a certain percentage of the population, it's a very small number, that has very serious health reasons not to get immunizations, and they rely on herd immunity. If you can't get herd immunity, those people are quite vulnerable. So here we have now a bunch of individual private decisions that affect basically other people's health and welfare. Having said that, I think, even despite that concern, and I think it's a legitimate concern, I think most people are inclined not to treat COVID as different from other vaccines and have basically, jurisdiction-wide mandates unless you have, narrow health exemption. And that's just kind of a civil liberties type thing. But I know in my business, the minute vaccines are available, the COR company is going to require it. That's because we have, very tight knit work groups. And if one person goes down, then you lose the whole production line for, 10 to 14 days. And that's, we start to lose that kind of money, then people start to lose jobs. So, we're in our workforce, my company, chances are if there's a vaccine available, you're going to be required to have that vaccine if you're going to come to work.
That's why
Yeah,
we're
one of
happy you're in the big boy politics, because that is going to be a tough issue going forward.
Well, it's a tough issue, and it becomes a very tough timing issue when you're looking at stretching further and further the ability to get a vaccine.
Yeah.
We're running significantly behind what they thought we would be.
Yes, the rollout has been postponed. I mean, right now, I mean, I think there's way more people who want the vaccine than there are vaccines available, but the rollout's been slowed a little bit, and that's been one of the issues that I've been invested heavily on for House leadership, was on the testing component. Like, what are the barriers to effective testing? And that's been a real challenge to try to get our arms around that. And it's a moving target, right? Tests are coming on board and things are changing so rapidly. It's so funny because we come up with a set of recommendations, and by the time you get around to refining them, then everything's kind of stale again. And now we're at a vaccine rollout. So in the testing recommendations that I just submitted to House leadership and the Health Department of Health, they said we've got to get ahead of the vaccines, because if you don't get ahead of the vaccines, what's the point, right? Stitch in time saves 9. If we get effective rollout on the vaccines, that's going to save you on the testing. That's going to save you on the healthcare costs and everything else. So we're trying to do that, but it's tricky business. And as George indicated, some of this throwing everything in the kitchen sink at some of these early cases appears to have created some mutations. And so now we have more, potentially more virulent strains, or that spread easier, and that's complicating efforts to fight the virus.
In our update yesterday with the county, Brian Hatch mentioned that his current staff has been able to stay on top of getting vaccines out because they don't have a lot of access to it. So that goes along with what Councilman Ensign, you were just saying. So he said, yeah, when we have more access to it, then we're going to have to find more people to be able to dish out the vaccinations. But yeah, he mentioned that same thing in our weekly update yesterday.
Well, it's always such an interesting debate, right? Because if you look at states that say are most effective at testing or the most effective at vaccine rollouts, they sort of go to a command and control type model. But Americans aren't really comfortable with that. And most of the time, our systems are built around local control. And so you see that with vaccine rollouts and everything else, which is, we're going to give it out. We're going to give it to local health departments, or give it to whoever they're giving it to. And some of those folks are going to do a great job in getting it out, and others are going to struggle. And that's just par for the course. That's kind of how it works. And so I think hopefully, we model best practices and get the word out. And right now we would love to have the problem where we have more vaccines than we need, and we're figuring out how to get them to who wants them. Now we have so few that, we just need a lot more of them for them to start to have a significant impact on the spread of the virus.
So Representative Hawks, during the session, are you going to, as in past years, be getting out like a weekly update, or what's your plan on communicating to your constituents? That was asked of the senators as well.
Yeah, my standard is I usually try to get out an issues survey. We're getting close here. I got to get one together. But an issues survey that I send out to all the constituents for whom I have email addresses, and I have quite a few of those, but not enough. So I send out an email, and then I try to do a survey, and then I try to do weekly emails through the session, just try to apprise people of what's going on. And then do one at the end to just sort of a little bit of a session wrap up. We'll probably do at least 2 Zoom calls, just sort of in the session in lieu of doing a town hall that I like to do. We'll do a couple of those, just open mic, come with your issue and talk about it.
And how are you? Obviously, you're looking to get more emails. You'd like to have as many of your constituents as possible. How are you collecting those? How would you like those to get to you?
Well, emails come fast and furious, and probably 1 in 50 are from constituents. But I do tell people, if you are a constituent, put it in the title. Say, hey, I'm a constituent, or even put it in the subject line, constituent, so I know. Okay. Because I'm keen on representing constituents more than just some random person from Timbuktu who wants to reach out to me on an issue that may or may not be relevant. So email's okay. I'll share my cell phone number, and please text me. That's a great way to get a hold of me. I get a lot of texts, but I'll at least stay on top of that better than email. That's 801-928-9008 for those of you that don't have it. 801-928-9008. That's the only phone I have. It's my personal and business and legislative cell phone. So feel free to text me and reach out. I will have a full-time intern. I don't have her contact information yet, but my intern is a great fail-safe too. If you have trouble, you text or you call me, you don't get anything, you can call the intern, and the intern will know where to track me down.
And for council and staff's knowledge, Representative Hawks in past years has had very good interns. You've done a very good job. They've been very helpful.
Well, they've been really nice to me and getting me good ones. I've learned that if I'm demanding in terms of my list of expectations, they usually get me one that's a cut above.
Well, and thank you for making yourself available in this session and sessions past. You've been very responsive in getting back to the council when we have thrown things your way. So we appreciate that.
Well, thanks,
Yes,
George.
we really do.
I'll try to keep that up. I really appreciate the outreach, and I want to be responsive. I'm there to represent you.
We'll test you. We'll wait till there's a floor vote, and then we'll send you a text and see how long.
Yeah, please do that, George.
Any other questions for the Representative Hawks?
Wish we were doing this in person.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, we'd have some cold Chinese for you.
Always appreciated.
I think we're going to be very interested in how the ADU legislation progresses. I mean, you've heard us talk about that for years in terms of we just felt like we couldn't move forward because of building code. And I've looked over the current legislation, and there are some modifications. I don't think they go far enough, but I will be really paying attention to that one. You might get a few messages from members of the council over that one, because that issue has plagued us for, gosh, as long as I can remember.
Well, welcome that perspective, really do, particularly where you've dug into it in the past. So let me know as you see drafts come out.
Will do.
So, Representative, I think the number I have for you is different, but maybe not. But it works when I get a hold of you, so I must be good.
Well, yeah, anyway, I can give it to you one more time. 801-928-9008.
Yep.
And if a different number's working, Mayor, I don't know.
No, that's what I got. I just didn't have it in front of me. Well, we thank you so much for your time. Like I said, you're our only state representative senator that lives right in Centerville. We love that. Any parting words from you? You get the last shot. How can we help you too? That's what I want to throw that out to you. That contact us however we can help you as well too, or some ideas that we may have in helping you.
Well, thanks, Mayor. I think the biggest thing is just to realize that we're a part-time legislature, and we're very much, particularly during the session, time limited and time constrained. So the more sometimes if somebody comes to me with a problem in the middle of the session, it's hard for me to resolve that problem, right? Because if I've got to do the groundwork and I've got to do the investigation, it's just me and an intern, right? So the more the thinking's been a little bit elevated, and you've considered the pros and cons, and bring that to me at a little more sophisticated, not sophisticated, but just a little more developed level, that helps me immensely. Because I can get up to speed that much faster, and I don't have to go do so much groundwork on my own, because that's the hardest thing for me to do.
Thank you. Take heed, everyone, that when we go to him, let's have our ducks all in a row to save him that time that he doesn't have.
Well, thanks to each of you for your service to the city. I really appreciate it. I'm a proud Centervillian. We love it. We love it in Centerville.
Center Villager.
There you go.
Thank you so much. And it was great to have you one-on-one for a bit.
You bet. Well, thanks, everybody. It's my pleasure.
Thank you.
We'll
Good
see you.
luck in that full contact sport you guys have up there.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye.
Yeah.
See everybody in 15 or 20.
Yeah, so we got a motion to adjourn the work session, and then we'll look for council at 7 o'clock.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. Thank you, everyone. See you in a bit.
Please mute